Well, Gillian Keegan is the Apprenticeships and Skills Minister. I asked her whether she was disappointed that the results have improved most for students at private schools.
Some fee-paying schools, it's something we see every year. That's why we're always focused on the disadvantage gap. But one of the things we did see this year is that actually all students did improve overall. That's great news. And, there was sort of stability in the results at all levels. So, yeah, we're delighted for all the students. But you do see some differences in those private schools because they're selective schools.
All students improved overall, but their relative placings did change, didn't they? I mean, when it comes to the disadvantage gap, as you call it, we saw that widen, albeit slightly. When it comes to students with special educational needs, we saw, again, the gap between them and other students widen. These are priority students for the government, and yet the trend is going the wrong way.
Well, actually, the trend has not been going the wrong way up until before the pandemic. In fact, it's been something we've focused on since 2011, and we've actually narrowed the attainment gap between those students by 9% at the age of 16 and by 13% at the age of 11. So that was actually on track, and we were narrowing the attainment gap. But of course, that has been set back a bit by the pandemic. And despite the fact that we've obviously done a lot to really help support those students, getting PCs to them, making sure they had access to online learning via the TV or via the Oak National Academy. We have seen the impact of the pandemic. We'll be focused very much on those students and making sure that they have access to all the things that are really going to help them make up that difference.
One of the other big gaps was between London and, if not the rest, then certainly London and areas like the North East, where we've seen a huge gap in results, in top-level results in particular. You are a government committed to levelling up areas, and that has focused pretty heavily on the North East. This, again, must be a huge disappointment.
Well, no, that's why we are focused on levelling up, because we've seen those inequalities, particularly between London and other areas in the North East and the North West. And that's exactly why levelling up is very much at the heart of the government's agenda.
So what are you doing in particular for schools in the North East?
Well, the first thing and the biggest focus has been making sure that every child gets a chance to go to a good or outstanding school. So when we first came to power in 2010, 68% of our schools were good or outstanding. Now, 86% are good or outstanding. Now, that means there's still 14% we need to get to. So we're very much focused on those, and also making sure there's a lot more options for young people all over the country.
Lord Jim O'Neill says in the Yorkshire Post today, he of the Northern Powerhouse, of course, former government minister, he says that the government's approach to education is embarrassing and that not enough is being done to deal with the attainment gap. He says there should be greater devolution of education policy. Is there anything in that?
I don't think so. I think the narrowing of the attainment gap, which this is very entrenched over years, the fact that we have narrowed the attainment gap, albeit that's been sort of slowed down and put off track a bit by the pandemic, I think is a great achievement.
We've seen girls streaking ahead of boys. And again, a trend that's been building for a while, accelerating in these results. I mean, it's great news for girls, but it can't be what you want to see.
No, I mean, obviously we want all pupils to be, getting the best grades that they possibly can. And as you say, it has been happening for a while that girls have been outperforming boys. And there's lots of different theories on development and different ages and stages when young people develop. But I think one of the things is that, any gaps between girls and boys, we can certainly see they are equalled out later on. And certainly when it comes to university jobs, and then look at, the top jobs and the people who hold them in the country, those gaps are overcome.
The other really striking division in these results is between selective schools, once known as grammar schools, and secondary moderns or comprehensives. And selective schools just do so much better in GCSEs. Is that because they are better at teaching, in which case you'd presumably like to see more of them, or is it that selective schools just cream off clever kids, in which case you have to wonder what purpose they serve?
Well, I think, first of all, you're right. Actually, secondary selective schools actually had the highest proportion of entries at grade 7 and above, even more than independent schools, which are also selective. Yeah. But I think the clue's in the title. They're selective. They select the pupils on some academic basis. They are selective. But that's why we're really focused on making sure that all schools are good, are outstanding. All schools have excellent teaching. And we've seen some amazing, you mentioned London, but there have been some amazing results from normal secondary schools. And more young people are going to university now from disadvantaged backgrounds. Many more from when I left school in Knowsley. I think about 21% now are going to university, which is a record year as well. So, the advantages are being spread in terms of the next steps and options.
There is an awful lot of chat about your boss and his future, Gavin Williamson. Are you confident he'll be there in the months to come?
Yeah, I've been working very closely with him, actually on this whole agenda of making sure there's brilliant options for the other 50%. So our whole further education reform, our reform of technical education. And, he's done a brilliant job on that. There's an awful lot that we've been doing despite all the disruption of the pandemic.
Education Minister Gillian Keegan.